Uh, Colleagues, good morning. Yeah, I wanted to be sure that we're not getting feedback. Our online audience, may I hear a confirmation that you hear us? You okay? Thank you very much. All right. Especially when the online is also physical. Okay. My name is Pamela Hanakwa. I'm the Dean of the School of Liberal and Performing Arts, and I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you for joining us today to celebrate with Alene as he gets to this point, a very critical point in his PhD studies. So we are here today for the PhD defense of Mr. Alene Kassaw Fentie. I'm not sure that I pronounced that correctly, but you bear with me. Alene worked on conflict in Wolkait, Ethiopia, actors' motivations, interests, and strategies. Congratulations, Alene, and we look forward to listening into your work. He was supervised by Associate Professor Venerandah Mbabazi, who is with us in the room, and Professor Godfrey Asiimwe, who is not able to make it here physically today. So I also congratulate the supervisors for walking the journey with the candidate up to this point. I would now like to introduce the members of the panel. We have with us Professor Helen Nambaliran Kavala. You're welcome, Prof. Dr. Bernard Luwerekera, Dr. John Bosco Kamoga, Dr. Hilary Chiza, and Dr. Charlotte Karunj Mafumbo. Thank you very much, panelists, for reading the candidate's work and making it today. I would now like to introduce our critical reader, Professor Dr. Peter John Opio, who comes to us all the way from the Faculty of Business and Development Studies, Gulu University. Professor Opio, I like to say that he's become part of us in the School of Liberal and Performing Arts. So Professor, you're welcome home. We are always happy to have you. Please join me to welcome our critical reader. And I would like to also acknowledge our Secretariat, our School Registrar, Ms. Florence Birabwa, without whom the PhD candidates know what life would be, and to also thank our own Professor Physical, Online, IT, Professor Farouk. Thank you very much for always making these defenses happen, for always making sure things are in order. And to thank you all colleagues for making time to come and listening to Alene's presentation. We don't take your presence for granted because we know there are so many competing responsibilities, but that you chose to come here, we don't take that for granted. So, Alene, we will have up to 30 to 40 minutes to take us through your work. Usually Farouk sets the clock there, then it counts down. And then after that, our critical reader will have up to 60 minutes to engage with you. And then we'll have the panelists all together taking about 30 minutes at most. The audience 10 minutes, and then we shall retreat as a committee to take a decision, and we'll come back and announce. So that said, you don't have to use all the time, actually. If you can use less than 40 minutes, that will be good. But again, not in 10 minutes. because I know that you'll need a little bit of more time. So without wasting a lot of time, I'd like to invite the candidate to take us through his presentations. Alene, we look forward to that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Pamela, for the introduction. Well, my name is Alene Kassaw. The topic, as you see, is conflict in Wolkait, Ethiopia, actors, motivations, interests, and strategies. This is how my presentation will go. Background, review of related literature, research methodology, and the findings, motivations, strategies, and interests of the TPLF and the FANO, and summary, conclusions, and recommendations, and publications, and finally, I will have a word of thanks. Well, let me start with the background. Well, Ethiopia has been in the grip of recurrent conflicts, and it has been really ranking the worst on global peace indexes. And in the 2024 Global Peace Index, for instance, Ethiopia has ranked 144 out of 163. And the cost of conflict has been really enormous. For instance, during the Derg regime, as you can see, 1.4 million Ethiopians were estimated to have perished. In March 2022 alone, for instance, 5,582,000 Ethiopians were displaced. And in the northern part of the country, the conflict has happened in 2022, and that left really hundreds of thousands of millions dead or displaced. And as you can see, 20 billion USD is required for the reconstruction efforts. So attempts were made, in fact, to manage conflicts. For instance, ethnic federalism was introduced in 1991, but it was not successful in terms of preventing conflicts, and various policies were also formulated, but they were not able to stem the wave of conflicts happening in the country. And these all conflicts, the various conflicts happening in Ethiopia, has been labeled or framed as taking ethnicity as the sole cause. However, conflicts are really complex in Ethiopia in terms of the underlying factors, the type and number of actors involved, and the levels and magnitude of manifestations. So in order to understand the complexity of conflicts, we need to put them into their own context. So this study actually looked into the conflict that is happening in Wolkait, which is found in the northwestern part of the country. And it specifically investigates the roots of the conflict through the perspective of the actors involved in the conflict. So I have reasons for undertaking this research. For one thing, the conflict in that area has not received any scholar attention or legal settlement, and really the human and material cost of the conflict was enormous. So I decided to look into the problem. Yet the scope is limited to the actors. I mean, just the intentional factors of the actors involved or engaged in the conflict, and it is also temporally limited, meaning it is limited to the period from 1970s up to 2024 when this study was completed. A statement of the problem. As I said, conflicts in Ethiopia were framed in terms of ethnicity, but this framing of conflicts has really eclipsed the underlying as the center of conflicts. So the issues at stake, the institutions and actors that are involved in the conflict, and the motives of the conflict actors are simply eclipsed because it has been framed in terms of ethnicity. Yet my argument is that ethnic groups are not monolithic actors fighting against each other. It is only political groups or elites that are claiming to represent ethnic groups that are fighting in the conflict. So it is therefore to fill these gaps that this study investigates the complexities of the conflict in Wolkait. So this study takes Wolkait as a level of analysis, and secondly, it adopts an actor-based approach that unravels the motivations, the interests and the strategies. And the research objective is to investigate the nature of the conflict in Wolkait in terms of the divergent motivations, strategies and interests of the TPLF and the FANO, which are the actors embroiled in the conflict in the area for decades. So the specific objectives are: 1, to explain the motivations, strategies and interests of the TPLF in the conflict in Wolkait, and 2, to explain the motivations, strategies and interests of the FANO in the conflict in Wolkait. So coming to the review of related literature, this study is anchored in 2 theories. One, the New Wars theory, and the other is the protracted social conflict theories. These two theories provide an integrated framework for analyzing conflicts in terms of actors, causes, interests and strategies. So the main tenets of these theories include: 1, you see just a shift in conflict dynamics in the world, because you see, for one thing, interstate conflicts have declined, and for another thing, intrastate conflicts have increased in terms of salience, recurrence and casualties. So these theories also provide just the reasons that propel conflict actors into conflict. For instance, there are some theories in these theories, for instance, provide various reasons that explain why actors are fighting. Is that grievance? Is that greed, survival, or stake weakness? And also they also provide insights with regard to the specific goals that actors pursue. These specific goals, for instance, include: 1, identity, territory, political hegemony, or secession. So depending on contexts, the various conflict actors pursue various specific goals, and they are also led into the conflict due to various motivations. And in the form of warfare as well, we can understand that from these theories, we can understand that the best strategies are not conventional warfare in the world now. Now that interstate conflicts have declined. Now that we have intrastate conflicts between the state on the one hand and the various non-state actors on the other hand, we have simply asymmetric warfare, in which actors are simply using guerrilla warfare, terrorism, and human displacement as strategies of warfare. Okay, coming to research methodology. The research design that this study adopted is qualitative case study design, which enables really to investigate a particular issue in its own natural setting. The study population of this study include those actors that are having a vested interest in that area, or those actors simply, one way or another, those actors fighting in the area. These include the TPLF, the FANO, the Prosperity Party, Eritrea is also there, Sudan, the United States, and the local communities. These are all simply the study population, those actors that are having interest in that area. But for the sake of this study, I selected 2 actors, namely the TPLF and the FANO, for various reasons. 1, they are simply conflicting actors in the area, laying a claim in the area, and also they are fighting actors, directly fighting actors, just claiming the area. For the sake of collecting data, I used purposive sampling, and I selected 2 samples from the TPLF side and the FANO side. I have also selected additional informants, that includes scholars, members of the community, and other experts in the area who are knowledgeable and experienced to share their views on the issue. With regard to data collection instruments, I used interview guide, focus group discussion guide, and observation checklist as a way of collecting data. Using interview, I engaged with 29 informants. And also I was able to organize focus group discussions with 18 participants, and generally I organized 3 focus group discussions, each involving 6 participants. And I also used a range of documents, secondary sources that include, for instance, scholarly articles, books, and online journals. Moreover, I also visited the area, using observation checklist. So I was having informal communications with community members, with residents. I also attended some events organized in the area. Then, having collected my data, I went to data analysis using thematic analysis and to some extent narrative analysis, as you can see. Ethical considerations, yeah, as you know, following ethical rules is a mandatory in doing research. Because for one thing, this research is very sensitive, and also in the course of collecting data and analyzing data, researchers should also abide by some ethical rules. So before I went to the field to collect data, I was able to get ethical clearance from the University of Gondar, where I was working. This is the study area. This is the map of Ethiopia. As you can see here, you have just amorphous lines here. These lines are simply ethnic lines. You see Oromia here, a regional state that is reserved for Oromos. This is the Somali region that is for Somalis. This is the southern region where we have many ethnic groups congregated together. We have here Gambella. We have a total of 9 regions. You have Tigray here and you have Amara here. And in between there is a contested area here that is depicted in purple color here. So that is the arena in which the Wolkait conflict was happening. So this area has been very important for the TPLF as well as for the Fano. During its insurgency, for instance, the TPLF used this area as a corridor to access foreign arms via Sudan. And this area has been claimed as an ancestral land for the Amhara. So it has been very contested since 1970s. So let me come to my findings. So the starting point will be the TPLF. Why the TPLF was formed? Well, the TPLF was formed in 1976 with the claim of Amhara domination. The TPLF claimed that the Ethiopian state was created by the Amhara ethnic group. And Tigrayans were subjugated, oppressed, and exploited by the Amhara ethnic group. So, at the time when it launched its insurgency, it published a manifesto. This manifesto was published in 1976 at the time of its establishment. So this manifesto gives us simply the grievances that led the TPLF to power and also the interests for which the TPLF launched the conflict and the strategies as well it pursued during its insurgency. So, as a form of strategy, it launched an ethnic-based armed struggle, targeting the Amhara population as a whole. Not only the Amhara ruling class, but also the Amhara ethnic group as a whole. So, the manifesto states that the number one enemy of Tigray is an Amhara ethnic group as a whole. So, it also deployed the narrative of Amhara domination, blaming the Amhara as a source of discontent as a form of grievance in Tigray region. This manifesto also provides us with the reasons why or the motives for which the TPLF was engaged in the conflict. So the stated goal was simply the elimination of the Amhara domination as a whole, meaning the lasting peace for Tigray will be the elimination of the Amhara ruling class and as well as the Amhara ethnic group as a whole. You can see the manifesto. So, just if you look at the manifesto, you can't really pin down the specific interest actually, apart from just eliminating the Amhara ethnic group. It doesn't outline, but it was wavering between autonomy and secession. So during its insurgency, it was fighting for two objectives. If it is able to win power, of course it can stay within Ethiopia. Otherwise, it could secede. So in 1991, the TPLF was able to overthrow the Derg regime. And it is not known whether the TPLF has abandoned its motive of secession, but simply in 1991, upon capturing its power, it settled with autonomy within Ethiopia. This is because now it has controlled power, it is at the helm of power, so it didn't find simply secession just a good interest to take, to pursue. So, the question is, why did the TPLF choose ethnic federalism as a form of state? Well, we have a number of reasons for which the TPLF adopted ethnic federalism. One of the reasons being, it wanted to entrench its hegemony at the level of the national power. The other is, it wanted to satisfy its economic greed. Now that power is on its hands, then it can usurp resources from the national budget. So it was simply redistributing economic resources so that Tigray would get the most out of the resources. And the other reason is simply, within Ethiopia, it wanted to expand into other regions. The justification put forward by the TPLF for why it adopted ethnic federalism. This is just the view that one of the interviews shared with me. It is necessary for the Amhara elites to accept the existing territorial arrangement. Raising the Wolkait and other territories is just an redentist claim that will not make way for peace between Tigray and Amhara. It will also be a threat to the rationale of ethnic federalism, which aims to address the national question by ensuring self-determination of the various ethnic groups of the country. Now, using the strategy of ethnic federalism, it has annexed Wolkait and other territories, Raya territories. So, simply, it used ethnic federalism as a justification. From now onwards, the Amhara could not claim Wolkait and other territories that are incorporated into the Tigray region or other regions. So subsequently, there were really protests against ethnic federalism and the annexation of Wolkait into the Tigray region. But the TPLF was not able to answer it because it goes against the grain of its interest. So the TPLF was focused on simply tightening its grip on Wolkait, using a range of strategies. It used, for instance, cultural and administrative homogenization, meaning in Wolkait and other Amhara territories that it annexed, it imposed the Tigrayan identity, the Tigrayan language on the Amhara population in those areas. It also imposed an alien system by filling administrative and judicial offices with Tigrayan cadres. There was also a demographic change, meaning the Amhara were simply wiped out from the area and instead Tigrayans were brought into the area to settle. And also the TPLF applied violence and inflicted attributes using brute force. Now, the most important thing here, the motives for carving Wolkait as part of Tigray. As I told you, the TPLF really manipulated ethnic federalism in order to expand its Tigrayan base. So, one of those territories into which TPLF expanded was Wolkait. One, the motive of the TPLF to make a foray into Wolkait is vengeance. Look at this extract. The Amhara ruled the country for 700 years and it is their turn to rule. In the event of losing power, the TPLF would rather dismantle the country than see the Amhara rule Ethiopia again. And also Wolkait would serve the TPLF as a springboard for further expansion. Now that the TPLF controlled Wolkait, it could also expand deeper into the rest of Amhara territories. Look, the TPLF can easily control Kwara in the mid-term plan. Kwara is found in Amhara region. It would then be just a walk in the park for the TPLF to control the Benshangul region where the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is located. So they were ambitious to expand their ethnic territories as far as the Benshangul region. The TPLF also sought Wolkait as a site of resettling Tigrayans, because the Tigrayan region, as you can see on the map, the Tigrayan region is very small. It cannot accommodate the Tigrayans, and also the Tigray region is simply an environmentally poor region. So the TPLF was in search of really fertile lands. Wolkait is the most fertile land in the country, in Ethiopia. So hundreds and thousands of Tigrayans were brought into the area as settlers. And finally, Wolkait will be important for TPLF envisaged Greater Tigray, meaning after secession, Tigray would have larger territories, having fertile lands, and having territories that can sustain Tigray economically. However, this did not materialize. The TPLF lost power in 2018. And Wolkait was restored to the Amhara region. This is because the Fano was military prepared, and now that the TPLF lost its national power, it retreated to the Tigray region. And finally, in collaboration with the Prosperity Party, the Fano was able to control the area, and Wolkait was restructured as a separate zone within the Amhara region now. So you see Wolkait now shifting hands from one actor to the other at different times. Now let's now come to the another finding. The last chapter. Motivations, strategies, and interests of the Fano. What are the founding motivations of the Fano? Yeah, actually the Fano have been part of the Amhara warrior culture, and they have been there for centuries, but they have gained resilience in 2016. And the Fano really regained resilience among the Amhara as a force of resistance in the face of persecution, in the face of loss of territories, and in the face of political subjugation. So the reasons why Fano was revived is political exclusion. Now, the Amhara elites and the population perceived that ethnic federalism has been used by the TPLF as a strategy of making the Amhara a minority in Ethiopia. So the Amhara really faced political exclusion, economic marginalization, and really lost their ancestral lands. So ethnic federalism was perceived as anti-Amhara politics, reminiscent of the brief Italian occupation. Italian occupation was from 1935 up to 1941 for the period of 5 years. But that occupation was consequential for the Amhara. Italy was targeting the Amhara because it perceived the Amhara as a unifying force in Ethiopia. So Amhara should be attacked, should be punished, so that Italy could control Ethiopia. Ethnic federalism lacked a federal bargain because Amhara was not represented at the time when ethnic federalism was adopted. And also the Amhara elites also conceived ethnic federalism as a strategy of TPLF hegemony. And the Amhara were also denied of their autonomy in Ethiopian federal system. The other reason is economic marginalization. Now the TPLF and its associates claim that the Amhara should pay for inflicting economic inequality in Ethiopia for centuries. But the Amhara were also discriminated and marginalized as well. The Amhara region lagged behind other regions in terms of infrastructure, urbanization, and really in terms of poverty. The most poverty, the worst hit region in Ethiopia is Amhara region, but it was perceived as the sole beneficiary of the Ethiopian state. So the TPLF simply brought forward a new fiscal policy that favored the Tigray region and other regions at the expense of the Amhara region. And the other reason is the Amhara really lost their ancestral territories. So the Amhara, in the guise of ethnic federalism, the TPLF really punished the Amhara by denying their ancestral territories. So a new ethnic map was imposed in 1991, the map that I showed you. That was simply implemented as a way of punishing the Amhara and placating the other ethnic groups. And also, it has been a tool for the TPLF's territorial aggrandizement within the federation. And the Amhara were complaining that, well, the TPLF lost power, it was ousted, but instead of having a democratic governance, what materialized was another hegemonic force dominated by the Oromo. So they continued their protests in many forms. So the Amhara, the Fano, felt that their grievances were not addressed, even though the TPLF was removed from power. So they used strategies now in the course of their struggle. These strategies include a mix of peaceful strategies as well as violent strategies. As part of their peaceful strategies, the Fano were one of the actors that joined, for instance, the Oromo protest movement that ousted the TPLF from power. And they continued with their protest movements called Beka, that means enough. These protest movements continued until 2023. In Amharic it says, Salfachin kaltasema Saifachin Nanasalan. Unless our demands are met, we will raise arms. And finally, their demands were not met and their grievances were not responded to. Then they finally resorted to armed insurgency as a last resort. Now that we have looked into the motivations and strategies, so what are the interests of the Fano, mainly as a national politics? What are the interests? One, the Fano are fighting to address what they generally claim to be existential threat of the Amhara. They claim that the Amhara are facing existential threat at the hands of the TPLF, at the hands of the Oromos. So they need to address this issue through either peaceful strategies or armed strategies. So my informant shared his ideas with regard to this issue. He said, the end of the persecution of the Amhara seems a false hope amid a shift of power in favor of the Oromo in 2018. The prosperity power that is in power has never made attempts to find a way to address the structural as well as immediate violence facing the Amhara, including holding perpetrators accountable. And the other interest is, as with other Ethiopians, the Fano are interested in making Ethiopia a democratic state. It has never entertained, unlike other political actors, the Fano have never entertained secession. As my informant explains, we do not aspire for Amhara hegemony in the national politics, nor secession as with other ethnic movements. So the other interest for which the Fano are engaged in conflicts is simply recovering the territories that are lost to the Tigray region and other regions. So the recovery of all Amhara territories forcibly absorbed into Oromia, Benshangul Gumuz region and the Tigray regions is non-negotiable. Now let's now come to the specific interests, grievances of the Fano in Wolkait region. So as I have explained, the TPLF had annexed Wolkait using ethnic federalism as a strategy for the sake of establishing greater Tigray. So what the TPLF did when it annexed Wolkait was simply it brought the members of Wolkait community and said, if you want to live in this land, in Wolkait, accept a Tigrayan identity. Otherwise, leave the area. Tigray is for Tigrayans. You see, now, Wolkait is declared as a Tigrayan land, where Tigrayans are only eligible to live. Others should leave the area. Then, this annexation of Wolkait really brought about counter-mobilization on the part of the Amhara community in the Fano in Wolkait. So Amharas launched armed resistance called Kafan Fano Patriotic Resistance. So the Fano is a fragmented political actor having various names in various parts of the country. So the one that is operating in Wolkait is called Kafan Fano Patriotic Resistance. So this Fano, branch of Fano, launched an armed resistance against the TPLF. However, unfortunately, their resistance was crushed in 1991 because the TPLF was able to capture the national power. So using the advantage of national power, the TPLF was able to crush the Fano movement operating in Wolkait. And the TPLF adopted ethnic federalism upon its state capture, and officially Wolkait was declared as part of the newly reconstituted Tigray region. The specific strategies of the Kafan Fano. There are specific strategies that the Kafan Fano pursued against the TPLF in Wolkait. The one was the early armed resistance, starting from 1970s up to 1991. And as I told you, this resistance was crushed easily. And the other strategy was using traditional mediation instead of using state institutions and cadres, institutions and policies. As my informant explains, the reason why they used traditional mediation instead of using government institutions. We had various reasons for abandoning the local government. First thing, our mother tongue, Amharic, was strictly forbidden in schools, markets, or government offices. The TPLF cadres are everywhere to enforce the use of Tigrinya. And secondly, against our will, we were incorporated into Tigray as Western Tigray Zone, whose seat was Shire, some 500 kilometers from Humara, the center of Wolkait. And also, they have been using petitions as a way of communicating their grievances, as a way of simply asking the various government institutions for solutions. They also formed what we call Wolkait Amhara Identity Committee in 2015. Now that their armed resistance was crushed and the various peaceful strategies were not successful, now they resorted to constitutional means, using legal means as a way of getting their problem addressed. And the main interest of this committee was reclaiming the Amhara identity and land through constitutional avenues. So, this committee had submitted petition to the Tigray region Council, as well as to the federal government. but they were not able to get responses. What they got was simply a barrage of threats. You have to stop this question. So the response, as my informant explains, we went to Mekelle, the capital city of Tigray region, to deliver our letter of request for the Amhara identity to the Tigray region, led by President Abai Woldo and Mr. Kudusan Nega, spokeswoman of the regional council. We highlighted our constitutional right to claim Amhara identity as provided for in the FDRA constitution. They turned our pleas into an oral warning, saying that Wolkait people are Tigrayans and the land is Tigray. This issue had already been settled. Your petition is a work of enemies that deny the existence of Tigray. And finally, now that they were not able to get positive responses, they also engaged in protest marches. And the one that happened in Gondar in 2016 was really phenomenal. The Amhara population was mobilized, and Wolkait was used as a rallying cry for the whole Amharas. And finally, this also strategy did not work. And finally, the Fano was making military preparations for a possible invasion of Wolkait. And finally, this materialized in 2022. And Fano was able to dislodge the TPLF from the Tigray region. Now, what are the specific interests of the Fano in Wolkait? For what purpose does the Fano want to take control of Wolkait? Now, one, it is the assertion of Amhara identity. The Fano claims that the Wolkait people are Amhara, so they should not be incorporated into the Tigray region. So the Fano have been struggling to extricate themselves from the TPLF subjugation. Now the Fano also want pursue another interest, that is simply getting Wolkait reintegrated, restored to the Amhara region. And also the Fano are asking for compensation for the atrocities and crimes perpetrated upon the Amhara community in Wolkait. However, the TPLF reiterates that Wolkait should be restored to the Tigray region. Meaning the TPLF is still now, even though it's lost the Wolkait region to the Amhara, it is still advocating the restoration of what we call the status quo ante. Now, for the interest of time, of course, let me come to summary. The Wolkait conflict is a struggle between actors whose goals are always incompatible. Meaning the TPLF is driven by a calculated plan for hegemony, economic gain, and territorial aggrandizement. On the other hand, the Fano are driven by a reactive struggle for identity, political rights, and territorial integrity. Now, the other summary point is Wolkait continues to be a battleground, changing hands from one actor to the other. And still, the existing ethnic federalism continues to be an instrument that actors use in order to legitimize their control of Wolkait. And as a result, Wolkait remains an intractable zero-sum conflict, pitting the TPLF and the Fano. And it is unfortunate that the federal government is still reluctant to address the conflict. What are the conclusions now? The conclusions now, the conflict in Wolkait is complex and multifaceted, even though it has been framed as an ethnic conflict between Tigrayans and Amharas. The conflict in Wolkait emerged in the context of political struggle, framed in terms of historical grievances, but exacerbated by competing ethnic mobilizations for ethno-nationalist projects. So the major contributions of this research include one, the research highlighted the major historical and political context and the evolution of how the conflict evolved starting from 1970s to 2024. And also it investigated the main actors, their motivations, strategies and interests in the conflict. And also the research brought to light the various institutions and policies that exacerbated the conflict in the area, and also it highlighted the prejudices and the narratives that fueled the conflict in the area. However, the study is short, even though it has contributions. The study is short on the following issues. This research doesn't include the intentions of the various actors that have vested interest in the area. Because this research is confined to the Fano and interest, even though there are also other actors. This research is also short of explaining the human security of people entrapped in the conflict in the area. This research also doesn't show simply the interest of the various external actors involved in the conflict in the area. So, in view of these shortcomings of the research, this study suggests that Wolkait is still an important context for future researchers to investigate the various issues that I mentioned here. Now the recommendations. In view of the research findings, I suggest that these two actors engaged in the conflict in Wolkait should shift their mindset. Yeah, they need to just take stock of the conflict, what they got, and the strategies really they have been pursuing. So they have to make room for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. And also these two actors, instead of simply engaging in a tug of war over the area, they need to simply push for a political reform. For instance, if this ethnic federalism is dismantled, there will not be conflict in the area, because that area will be for both Tigrayans and Amaras, even for other Ethiopians, no problem. It will not be just an exclusive reserve for a particular ethnic group. And the other is transitional justice. There are many people on both sides who were victims of the conflict. So perpetrators should be held accountable and victims should be compensated. And also policy-wise, there are some specific simply mechanisms that need to be considered as a way of resolving the conflict. Governance issues should be tackled in the area, and minority rights protection. For instance, the Amhara may be minority or the Tigrayans may be minority in the area. But whoever they are, their rights should be respected. And it may not be feasible or it may not be preferable for both actors, but they need to also consider the chance of carrying out referendum as a way of resolving the conflict. And it may be incorporated into Tigray or to the Amhara. It doesn't create a problem. But those Tigrayans living in the area, those Amharas living in the area, should have their rights respected and promoted. And these are the publications, the articles that I published from this thesis. And finally, a word of thanks to my supervisors, Associate Professor Venerandah Mbabazi and Professor Asiimwe Godfrey. And without their really constant encouragement and intellectual support, I could not have reached this far. Thank you very much. And I would like to really appreciate the support that they offered to me, Gerda Henkel Stiftung, CHOOS, and even project administrators. They are not here. But I need to appreciate. Oh, I need to appreciate really. Thank you very much. So members of the doctoral committee should be also recognized and appreciated for reading the material. Participants of the study, family members and colleagues were there in the course of carrying out this research, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alene, for the presentation. I must say this is very loaded work, and I thank you for taking us through the presentation. I wanted to complain that you don't thank me, you don't thank the school, but it's okay. May I now invite Professor Opio to come and engage the candidate. Thank you. Did you get some water, Alene?
Thank you very much indeed. I think I will start by actually doing what the candidate did not do, by thanking the dean, the school. Well, yes, seriously so, because in our becoming almost a part of the household name here, I'm always privileged to be invited to participate in these extraordinary and processes of birthing new scholars for the future of our continent and of our world. So I thank you very much. And I also thank you because you have always very promptly made it possible for me to carry out my task assigned to me with great ease and pleasure. With those few remarks, dear candidate, dear doctoral candidate, as the tradition, the academic tradition demands, before you are awarded the well-deserved laurel, the doctorate degree, you are required to show cause why the university and the institution should consider you fit and competent for this great honor, which you really deserve. I must start by confessing that listening to you explain and take us through this work, one is convinced, as I am, that yes, you put your heart, mind, soul, and everything into this work. And this is very important. I can almost immediately conclude, before I even start, that this is not a third-party PhD, because the lucidity with which you are able to explain this is a testimony that you stayed with this. So be proud of yourself. If I may, allow me, dear doctoral candidate, to prefix my comment on your great work, Conflict in Wolkait, Ethiopia, Actors, Motivations, Interests and Strategies, with that of the Hungarian Laszlo Krana-Horkai, this year's Nobel laureate in literature, for two reasons. Firstly, when I received the electronic copy of your dissertation while in Arusha during a training on policy planning and implementation, I was reading the reactions to this year's extraordinary laureate in literature. The novel upon which the laurel was awarded to Laszlo is an extraordinary piece. It comprises just one sentence, something that makes the old German sentence structure, hitherto considered the quintessence of pedantry, a pale shadow of stylistic prowess. One of the comments by Waltz Hunter from The Atlantic describes the Nobel laureate's work as an, I quote, unusually experimental but, in quote again, perfectly timely piece which nobody ever dreamed about within the traditional Nobel conventions. Your work too, like Laszlo's, is a perfectly timely, realigned discourse on conflict in Ethiopia in general and Wolkait in particular, with a sustained reference to conflicts, and I was able to do the word count, mentioned 225 times. Your passion, dedication to the problem of conflict in the country in question is admirable. I must admit that I never ever imagined before reading your 365 page or so work that one would sustain a discourse on a heavily emotive and nerving issue of conflict that is becoming so cancerous in Africa and in an increasingly unstable world, again quoting from the comment on Laszlo's work, without breaking down psychologically the storyline of conflict. Much unlike of that of love, is a dreary piece and does not make an easy reading. I must congratulate your supervisors for their audacity for navigating with your emotionally renting work and conflict. That you are able to stay on course, focused and relentless in your analysis of conflict in Ethiopia over the 4 years of your study without breaking down is testament of your Laszlo-like tenacity to achieve the extraordinary through the ordinary. Perhaps you too deserve a Nobel Prize of sorts in conflict studies. Secondly, Like Laszlo's work, your discourse on conflict is, I quote, uncompromisingly bleak and difficult. To be honest, reading your work, one encounters the bleakness that countenances the human experience of conflict. You have not tried to sweet coat what is painful in conflict. The unfathomable complexities of the actor's motivations, the self-serving interests and maneuvers employed by conflict entrepreneurs. This is an expression I got from one of the great analysts. To fend and sustain conflict with the attendant socioeconomic cost to the many and benefit to the few. In many respects, your analysis of the problem of conflict, critically difficult and demanding, is akin to Laszlo's, who describes his own style as, I quote, reality examined to the point of madness. Worth mentioning in this regard is your analytic prowess in breaking away from a monolithic understanding of motives for conflict. On page 44, you cogently note, it should be stressed that the source of motivation is not limited to a single factor. Motivations are also in a state of flux as the dynamic or context of conflict changes. Whereupon, I quote, for example, an insurgent group that caused the conflict for regime change may mutate into one for making money or looting. And this is reality of conflict beyond the Ethiopian border. And I know quite a number of us are not strangers to that. Similarly, your work questions and finds wanting the attractive but unqualified assumption among many scholars and authors that conflict is ultimately rooted in ethnic federalism. Your sustained challenge of this assumption is the Achilles heel of your work. You have accomplished a truly comprehensive, informative, detailed account of the conflicts in the Ethiopian region of Wolkait and attempted to explicate the various motives and strategies the protagonists thereof employ to maintain the status quo, or as rightly state, entrench their hegemony. A sad chapter in the history of Ethiopia with far-reaching consequences, to be sure. You have in this work demonstrated a commendable level of scholarship and proven your ability to make sense of a complex matter. Pitting your work against that of this year's Nobel Prize winner in literature, Laszlo, is not a backhanded compliment. I heartily congratulate you for this intricate analysis of conflict in Wolkait. A true oeuvre d'oeuvre. Finally, just as our own literary titan, the late Ngugi wa Thiong'o, noted in his great work, the beautiful ones are not yet born. The perfect dissertation is one that has not yet been written. A great work has many gray areas and raises many questions and sentiments, and yours surely does. There are clear challenges with salient issues relating to your problem statement, research design and instruments, among others, which I won't belabor. I will limit our conversation on 3 areas only. And now, pay attention because we are entering into this conversation. 1. Your topic reads, Conflict in Wolkait, Ethiopia, Actors' Motives and Interests and Strategies. Well, quite apart from the title just reading conflict rather than conflicts, and from your explanation, I wonder whether there is one conflict that subsumes all the conflicts. There have been so many discourses on conflicts in Ethiopia and the Wolkait region. One notices that from the many references that you have made, and any check you will see, and everybody knows really, I mean, that actually Ethiopia historically is one of the bedrocks of conflicts, not only in Africa but globally. And that does not mean that it is exceptional. What is distinctive about yours? Specifically, what is your thesis as an academic work? You've explained, I have read, but I still need to be to be informed about this. What did you set out to establish that other studies have not? In what ways, if any at all, do you see your work influencing the government policy on conflict management and or resolution? Maybe you can respond to this.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for showering me with accolades. Thank you very much. Coming to your questions, and you started with the topic, Wolkait, conflict in Wolkait, Ethiopia, actors, motivations, interests, and strategies. Well, there are many conflicts in Ethiopia, and Ethiopia is well known for as a hotbed of conflicts, as you said. So what I have in mind while writing this thesis is simply the conflict in Wolkait. So maybe I could add S after conflict. It becomes conflicts in Wolkait, but it says conflict in Wolkait. Particular, I'm focusing on a particular conflict that is happening in Wolkait. So the topic seems to be correct for me.
Okay.
If it said, for instance, conflicts in Ethiopia, yeah, it would have been correct. Otherwise, this research is focused on the one particular conflict that has lingered in Wolkait for decades. So you may not be satisfied, but that is my answer, Professor.
And the thesis. Yeah, you know, the thesis is really the key statement, the distinctive statement that this work is about.
Well, the thesis is that conflict has been there in Ethiopia in general and in Wolkait in particular for decades. And this conflict has not been just because of ethnicity, but it is because of grievances or greeds caused in terms of ethnic grievances. So that has been as the center of the conflict in Ethiopia in general and in that particular area in particular. So as you can see, for instance, the TPLF, it caused its grievances in terms of Amhara domination. But in fact, as I have ascertained, the Tigray region has never faced any kind of oppression and marginalization by the central government in Ethiopia. But for the sake of controlling power, the TPLF was able to just manipulate the poverty that was rampant in the region as a way of simply galvanizing support. Then it was able to capture power. So deep inside, it is a greed for power and resources. But the conflict was framed as ethnicity, as if the Amhara were the only, the Amhara were responsible for the grievances that Tigrayans really faced.
And how would you use this to influence the government policy on conflict management or resolution?
There are many ways of dealing with conflicts, but in view of my research findings, I could say the government should abandon or modify the existing ethnic federalism, because this is a structure that simply encourages ethnocentrism in Ethiopia. It is simply a structure, the policies and institutions, you see, that are pitting one ethnic group against the other for resources, call it territory or power. So we need to do simply politics in another way. We should not manipulate ethnicity for political reasons. Well, ethnicity is not a problem, in my opinion. Everybody belongs to this or that ethnic group, and individuals can also promote and enjoy their culture, language, and their rights also should be respected. But using ethnic cleavage for the sake of advancing ulterior motives, political, ethno-nationalist political projects is really detrimental.
Thank you. Now, what if I were to say, well, just rearticulating what you are saying and having led to you, that your work is not really about conflict in Wolkait. Your work is an appeal, a clamor to transcend ethnic federalism. And so, thinking of this, I wonder if you would articulate the work, the title to read, Beyond Ethnic Federalism, Rethinking Actors' Motivations, Interests and Strategies within the Wolkait conflict. Because listening to what you have explained, and also in trying to articulate, it seems to me that a much more penchant, incisive title would actually do better justice to your entire work. That is my suggestion. I don't just only want to shoot at you. Let us move on to another area and listen carefully. This is something that came out of my reading of the dissertation given to me and what I thought was a missing link. Your dissertation is purportedly towards the award of Doctor of Philosophy in Religious and Peace Studies, although it is written, I think, wrongly here in Religion and Peace Studies. But ironically, there's hardly any attempt to either anchor the work in the Ethiopian religious discourse. And we know Ethiopians have a long religious tradition which actually predates even Christianity. And Ethiopia boasts of even linkage to the Jewish Solomonic tradition. But there is hardly any mention of any discourse on religion or religious scholarship, whether on peace or conflict management resolution. This silence on religion, in my estimation, is disturbing and challenges your reading and understanding of the historical root of the conflict in Ethiopia. Forgive me, because it's very difficult to tell from the Ethiopian names whether it is a he or her. But I just put in his or her recent work, Understanding Causes of Conflict in Ethiopia, Historical, Political, and Institutional. Berihu Asgele Siyun. Is it a he or a she? Is Berihu Asgele Siyun a female name? A man. A man. Okay, good. Thank you for educating me there. Establishes how religious philosophy of Ewastotiwos, which dates back in the 13th century BC, morphed into conflicts between Amhara and Tigray, and has persisted through the political differences and seems to exert itself even within the modern conflicts. What justification do you have for this lack of attention? Of course you will say my work is transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary, whatever, but surely you are defending it in the Department of Religious and Peace Studies. Yeah, it is a deliberate lack.
Well, thank you, Professor, for your serious comments. Well, I have many reasons for not entertaining or including some religious discourses in this thesis. This is for reasons. For one thing, when I came to Makerere University in 2021, I joined the Department of Political Science and Public Administration. This is simply the department where I developed the proposal. And, in the course of writing my proposal, I was not having good relations with supervisors, and I was not making progress. So I shifted to the Department of Religion and Peace Studies. And since then I have been, of course, working on modifying the already developed proposal. But I was not able to simply incorporate religious discourses because of my background as a student in the Department of Political Science. Okay. And the other reason is that I don't have experience and knowledge in relation to religious matters in Ethiopia, because in my professional experience, I'm from political science. I studied political science, so I could say a lot about conflict. I could say a lot about actors, structures, diplomacy, and other things. But I didn't have any kind of, interactions with religious matters. And for, but indeed, as you said, I should have said a bit about some religious discourses. But this is also for a reason. You see, the conflicts in Ethiopia are mainly for, or they revolve around issues of ethnicity, not religion. Religion has not been a cause for conflicts in Ethiopia as far as I'm concerned. It was in the 15th century where the Christians who were living in the northern part and the Muslims living in the southern part, especially in the Somali part, that were fighting against each other. But since that time onwards, we haven't seen any kind of conflict along religious lines. It has not been even manipulated for political reasons. So it is only ethnicity that we have been grappling with in Ethiopia. And in particular, in Wolkait region, you have the Tigrayan community and the Amara community, who are predominantly Christians. So religion cannot be a fault line here for the two communities to engage in conflict. And even the TPLF or the Fano have never raised religion as an issue. So I didn't see any reason to incorporate religious discourses in this thesis. Thank you.
Yes, we could argue a little bit because the actors are integrated human beings who are economic, political, religious, and history. And also you must know that there is history of religion and also religion of history. So these are all things that are coordinated. But we will pick on this later on. Because I'm bringing this deliberately when we'll get to look at the next thing, your findings, conclusions, and recommendations. Your formulation of the conclusions and recommendations, you've explained them, but in my estimation, are counterintuitive and appear at best trivial afterthoughts. You note in your section on the recommendation, for example, I quote directly, in view of the above discussed theoretic insights and empirical findings, you offer unfounded prescriptions for the conflicting parties to work on. And then you say amicable settlements of the conflict by reconciling the competing interests, by developing a sense of empathy, a psychological readiness to put oneself in the shoes of the other, making them feel guilty for the suffering of the other. All these to me sound like a list from an NGO workshop rather than a scholarly drawn conclusion. Apropos to my observation on your omission of any serious religious discourse above, your recommendation and the entire study, in my estimation, would have found a veritable scholarly anchor. For instance, Emmanuel Levinas's discourse on the face of the other, Law 3, in his work Totalite et Infinite, Totality and Infinity, pits unsullied and unqualified respect for the other, the alterity, as a motu proprio for transcending conflict. The philosopher Levinas suggests that the ethical encounter with the face of the other is a foundational principle for conflict resolution, rather than viewing conflict as a clash of interests to be overcome. Levinas argues for a radical shift in perspective that prioritizes infinite responsibility and empathy for the opponent's humanity. And I'm saying this because, although your work is well laced, but really, is it not going to remain just one other modern anthology discourse on the conflict in Wolkait? And you ask yourself, for what? Surely the concern of the Ethiopians, the Tigray, the Wolkait, all those ethnic groups is to reach a position where they live in peace, isn't it? And how, on what can you found this? If this song of ethnic federalism continues to be exacerbated by political entrepreneurs. So now you see why I think that the conclusion to me, and you'll have to justify that these are founded there, but to me it seems after you've done all these, then you felt no, there's something that is lacking, and then you have to mention empathy and all that. But is there anywhere in your work where this really comes out?
Well, thank you very much, Professor. Yeah, your comments make sense. But to some extent, my work is exclusively on the actors' motivations, interests, and strategies. And you see, and I explained why the actors are engaged in conflict. The strategies that they used as they engaged with each other. Yeah, recommendations should be directly linked to the research findings, and I believe. But in the recommendation section, I didn't want to, for me, saying that PLF should do this, the FANO should do this or should not do this. It felt like an imposition for me. So I didn't dare simply, bringing to the fore the specific actions that the two actors should do. Instead, what I was recommending is simply for the two actors to develop the psychological willingness to come together and sort out the problem. So it will be up to them to put forward the best solutions, the solutions that best fits their interests and strategies.
Yes.
That was, for instance, I can say ethnic federalism as a recommendation. I could say ethnic federalism should be abandoned. But if this recommendation will not be accepted by the TPLF, I know, because the TPLF sees ethnic federalism as its base strategy and interest. On the other hand, the FANO may accept my recommendation. So instead of simply helping them resolve, I'm aggravating the problem by making specific recommendations. Simply, I encourage the actors to come together and they take stock of what happened in the area. The material and humanitarian toll, that the conflict really brought about. Then, once they come down and think about the conflict in terms of these things, they can easily develop communication. They can easily simply bring about possible solutions that could satisfy their interests.
Yes, that is good, but given the nature, the protracted nature of the conflict, and the hegemony of distrust, distaste, where even you pointed out from one of your respondents, Tigray belongs to the Tigrayans. You other people, get out of here. So how are you going to anchor this dialogue? You also mentioned the issues of justice, where, you know,
I was invited to the American embassy last year, and there was a round table about conflicts in Ethiopia. So I was there to share my views about the conflict in Wolkait. There are also other experts sharing their ideas in relation to other conflict hotspots. So in that round table, I brought about my article, that published one. Really, that was a good article read by 3,600 people, really. And some people were really angry with the research findings. Some were really happy. But the good thing that I presented the findings using that research paper to the American diplomats. And they were really surprised because they were fed what they have about, the information they have about Wolkait is simply a mediated information that they simply go through the TPLF. So because the discourse of conflict has been shaped by the TPLF ideology, what they know closely is about simply Wolkait belongs to the Tigrayan region. The Amara are simply the dominant ethnic groups. So really, I can't say they have changed their mind, but they have accepted my opinion, my research findings, and really, before that, they were talking, Wolkait is Western Tigray. It is not an Amhara territory. Even they were simply saying this publicly. But since that time onwards, they refrained from using even the word Western Tigray. They prefer to use Wolkait because I supported these claims through evidence, and now they have got a clear idea about the conflict in Wolkait. So really, I was able to inform policymakers, diplomats, and government officials about the real cause behind the Wolkait conflict. And I can't boast that it could also change the minds of many Ethiopians, but as they read through my articles and the thesis, really, some people may be predisposed to changing their attitude towards the problem.
Okay, dear candidate, thank you very much. Your work is instructive, and I look forward to welcoming you to the Laurea Philosophia Doctoratus. I rest my case.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting engagement. Please let's applaud the critical reader for very carefully reading Elena's work. Elena, do you want to sit a little bit? Because now I'm going to invite the panelists to ask their questions, but you'll take questions or comments from two panelists before you respond. So you can sit a little bit and take the notes.
Thank you very much.
So I'm looking at Doctors Kamaga and Dr. Chiza and figuring out who should come first. Okay, senior. Okay, Dr. Hilary Chiza, please. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I thank you, our candidate, our Mr. Alene, for the good job well done. I also really thank our critical leader for this important engagement that has, and your response to the engagement. The work is indeed very good. It has actually answered most of the questions I would have put before you. And I congratulate you once again for moving this very far.
Thank you very much.
And you are near to the truth, but the truth is always demanding. Most of my conversation with you is more or less going to be more of a comments than the questions, because you seem to be really to have brought out clearly most of the aspects that I should have asked, and the critical leader also goes ahead to bring new insights that I never had in my mind. Yeah, now I'll begin with some comments about your work. I failed to see the distinction between your introduction and the background. It is more or less the same. How I wish you would see features that are similar, and you only make a brief introduction to the entire work, but then the rest of the work that I see in the introduction could still be part of the background. That is just the first comment I'm making. Then the other comment is on chapter 2 of your literature review, in which you have the theories that you used to guide your work. When you read chapter 2 and you move on, although you have a theoretical framework of your work, it does not distinguish itself from other scholars you use in that very chapter. In my view, I had asked myself, I wanted to ask you, how many theorists informed your work? How many scholars form part of the theories you anchor your work? In your response, in your presentation, I realized at least you have 2 theories that guided your work. But when you look at page 22 up to page 22 up to page 26, you have a variety of authors with different theories. A reader may fail to know which authors informed your work, apart from the 2 theories that you raised. So I would be very much interested to see you either shifting the theoretical framework into chapter 1 there or somewhere, even if it is in literature section, but you dwell on 2 authors that you feel informed your work before you go further to other authors that are reflected in the literature review. Because this continuation fails a reader fails to follow. Now that in your presentation you raised two theories that guided your work, I will just have a question over there, but let me take you back the statement of the problem to follow the technical part of the thing. As you were giving what the problem is, I failed to distinguish what the academic problem of your thesis would be in relation to other normal problems that anybody on the street would cite out. For instance, what has the government of Ethiopia done to these conflicts since they started, at least as reflected in the scope, the time scope of your work? Are there other players that have been moving on to address these conflicts in the area of study? With which success have these brought, at least moved towards a solution? And what has failed that is bringing that kind of a problem that took you into research? If these efforts are not brought out, then the question of the problem still remains. And I wanted you in your response to articulate precisely and clearly the academic problem to the audience and be able to distinguish it from the conventional problems that everybody knows. That you write it because I haven't ended, so that the clarity of the problem comes out. This topic is a little bit broad in my view, and I thank you for really working very hard to ensure that the topic is thoroughly analyzed. And I wanted you to explain to me about these two objectives I see. We turn to the objective section, and that is on page 26. One of it is to explain the motivation, strategies, and interests of the TPLF in the conflict in Wolkait. Another one is also to explain the motivation, strategies, and interests of the FANO in the conflict in Wolkait. Now my question on these objectives is that what happens after having seen the motives, the strategies, and the interests of these two actors? What were you trying to achieve? What will happen thereafter? Because I see these objectives are more or less the same. They are only differentiated by the actors. I would wish you to clarify and help me to understand this. This is like one objective which is only differentiated by actors. You will help me and the panel and the audience to understand these ones, and then what will happen thereafter. So, looking at that section of the objectives, I want now to go back to the theories that you used. Those two, apart from showing their describing them, analyzing them, theories to the conflict you are studying, how did they help you to get into those objectives that were not very clear to me at the beginning? What gaps did you find in these theories? And you have already given your contributions to the study, but how do those contributions you raised fill the very gaps I am interested in knowing? Lastly, because my other issue would have been on how practical are these recommendations in the context of the area you covered the work at. But this has been raised by the critical reader, and I still raise it. But then I go to methodology briefly and ask you a few issues. How did you select the TIPLE and the funnel among the list of the actors? Was it left at your discretion as you state in your work? How did you select the two among the list of the actors? Then another related question should be on the definition of the key terms. Who is an actor according to you? I don't see where you define the actor that should guide the audience, but you only identify the two actors in the work. Who in your opinion is an actor? So that from the start we know that you are having the two actors. And then of course, having identified who an actor is, I would wish you to help me understand how you selected these two actors from the many actors that could be involved in the conflict. I'm happy, as I was about to ask, in your presentation, you mentioned something you mentioned in the interview you held with one of the respondents. And a petition had been brought, and the response from government was, your petition is the work of enemies. Who are these enemies in your own research findings? Are these enemies internal or external? You mentioned somewhere about the Italians, and these I would believe constitute foreign enemies that could be having indirect historical interests in the area, taking advantage of the conflicts they are in. What do you have to say about what I have heard from your own presentation? You selected two, of course, those actors. You selected those two participants per those actors depending on accessibility, because you stated, is that all insufficient? Because on page 98, you say, thus, I selected at least two participants per actor, meaning in the two groups, depending on accessibility, to enhance a deeper investigation of the issues under study. As a PhD researcher, would accessibility be the reason for selecting the two participants, or you could have, and I'm happy you stated it was purposeful sampling, the sampling techniques you used. You were on purpose, and therefore the two participants per actor should have been selected on purpose. Would really accessibility be the strongest reason for the selection of these participants? I would love you to respond to that. And then lastly, I hope I have what is the measure? Because when you look at the title, Conflict in Wolkait, Ethiopia, actors' motivations, interests, and strategies. Would you help me understand what your measure of motivations in this research are? Because you surveyed their motivations, you surveyed their interests, of course you saw their strategies. How did you measure the motivations and the interests? Because these are two areas that you cannot measure, you can describe, but to measure my motivation, to measure my interest, it is a very hard task in my own opinion. Would you kindly respond to my questions? Otherwise, I thank you so far for what you are doing, and thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Alene, I'll ask you to just hold a little bit so that you also get questions or comments from Professor Helen, and I'm kind of ambushing her because I know she has to run somewhere else. So Dr. Kamoga, kindly bear with me.
Thank you, my Dean, and congratulations, Alene. Sometimes I think the name is Helen. Is it supposed to be? Okay, it was interesting to read the work, and I want to really thank the opponent. I have a minor one to start with. When I was reading about your work, in some places it is called Wolkait, in other places it is called Wolkait. Has this got to do anything with the Tigrayan and Amhara way of referring to it? Because when I looked at it, it reminded me of Horeb and Sinai. Same mountain, different names. Why could this be? And the reason I am asking, can our issue that we are discussing today be having some roots in the ownership of the spaces? Secondly, I was looking at your argument. During your presentation, you argued that this is not an ethnic issue per se. And if I misunderstood you, please correct me. You tended to argue that it's a political matter. But at another point, you question whether it is secession, identity, political hegemony. Where is the dichotomy for you between the ethnicity and the politics? What is the difference in your view? And what do you refer to as politics? Is politics only that which is foreign? I put that in quotes. Or actually in these ethnic beliefs and practices we have some political connotations that could be playing part in what we see happening in that area. I also wanted to hear a little bit more of your comments on the Famo resistance movement and how this feeds into the situation that we are seeing in the area. At one point we see that the Amhara have some kind of, you know, they take up the Gonda province. What does this mean for the Tigrayans? And in your view, actually I was looking for the problem tree, but I wanted to look at your supervisor more here. Because I wanted to look at how did you try to get to the root? Because in your own writing, on page 1, you mention that even with the change of governments, and in your own understanding, the change of ideology, I don't know whether governments come with a change of ideology, the issue has persisted. So why? What did you find out? And lastly, I will ask the classic one. I'll ask the classic one, but maybe before I ask that classic one, you talk about forced assimilation, but you're not clear on who could assimilated who. Have you tried to go back to the past? I'm not sure whether there were IDs to know who was occupying first and who came later. You know that the challenge we are having in Israel-Palestine is about assimilation and taking over land. Could it be possible that someone just came? Who of the two, the Amhara and the Tigrayan, claimed the original ownership? And is it also possible that it was a shared space, but they started fighting because of the invisible borders that we got after the Berlin Conference? I know it wasn't divided, but the ethnicities, do they speak to each other? And I'm asking out of ignorance. And then lastly, the classic one. You talk about the actors, motivations, interests, strategies. And my question is, so what? So what? What is it that you're telling us that is new? What is it that you're telling us? How is your work going to support the team, the committee which was put in place to resolve the conflict? That is if it is a conflict. I'm not sure whether it is one or not. And I want to take the opportunity to congratulate you upon coming this far.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Helen. For those who don't know, Professor Helen is also our principal of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Principal, we are very happy to have you here with us today as one of the panelists. So, Elena, you can respond to those submissions.
Well, let me start with the comments raised by Dr. Okay. And she started with even the name, Wolkait. We call it Wolkait. You may not pronounce it well. Yeah, well, we call it Wolkait normally. And even Tigrayans call it Wolkait. It is the same, but it is a matter of preference. Tigrayans call the area Western Tigray, but Amharas prefer to call the area Wolkait. Yeah,
so the spelling is W-E or W-O?
In all the literature, the K is you don't see the word K, but Q.
What about the E after the W?
Oh, it is also possible. It is also possible to write it in that way, W-E. But this variation, I don't know. But I'm familiar with the word, but I don't know. But for the sake of consistency, Exactly. I prefer to use this one. Yeah. Sure. Oh, in that case, I will correct it. In that case, yeah. And you said, I argued that the issue is not an ethnic matter, but a political issue. What is the difference? Well, it is a matter of framing for me. For me, it is a political issue. Yes, of course. The way I see it. But for some individuals and the politicians, it is purely an ethnic matter. The problem occurred because of ethnic difference. They wanted to mobilize the people around their cause, because they framed it as ethnic issue. But for me, I don't want to use ethnicity because it will exacerbate further the problem. For me, I see that it is a conflict between the TPLF and the Fano, not between the Tigrayans on the whole and the Amhara as a whole. Because I have friends from the Tigrayan side. We are not in conflict. So it is not an ethnic conflict for me. It is the TPLF and then the Fano, two specific actors. And they are fighting for a reason. They have their own reason. Me, I'm not fighting there. I don't have any reason. So I'm not in conflict there. Even though I'm an Amhara and somebody is a Tigrayan, still there are many Tigrayans. We are having coffee and we talk to each other. And for that matter, ethnicity, it has been accentuated disproportionately by the TPLF. The Amhara and the Tigrayans, we share more in common. The difference, there is a fine line between Amharas and the Tigrayans for me. You may not distinguish between the Amhara and the Tigrayans. Yeah, exactly. We look very similar. In terms of religion, we are similar. In terms of culture, very similar. In the language difference, even I can understand even their language. And for your information, in that area, the people are multilingual. There are some Amharas who speak Tigrinya. There are Tigrayans who speak Amharic. So even language ethnicity is not an issue for the majority of people. It is an issue for these political actors. That is my response. And you said the conflict in Ethiopia has persisted. Yes, in fact, it has persisted. There were conflicts during the Haile Selassie regime, but during that time the conflicts were more of economic and provincial. But during the Derg regime, the conflicts were more of ideological. There are some groups that espouse socialism as a state ideology. There are some groups who espouse capitalism. So the difference here, the point of contention is ideology. And in 1991, we introduced a different political system. Now, a new ideology came in, that is ethnicity, using differences as an ideology in pursuit of political or other aspirations. So even though there are some variations in terms of ideology, still there are conflicts in Ethiopia, but the magnitude is different. The number of actors and their interests also vary. But indeed, there are many conflicts here. But one thing that makes, conflicts intractable today. Conflicts became ethnicized, wrongly ethnicized, galvanizing the majority of people into the conflict. And even the structure itself, ethnic federalism, instead of preventing federalism, instead of alleviating, conflicts, ethnic federalism is aggravating conflicts because it is making a distinction along ethnicity, a distinction. Political actors to use ethnicity as a mobilizing tool. And because of this, conflicts are getting worse and worse. That is the difference. But just throughout, conflicts have persisted, but in a varying magnitude and form. And you said, who is assimilating who in Wolkait? Well, I know the area very well, and even as an Amhara, of course, I belong to that area. And even the Tigrayans are also, they can also claim the area, of course, they are living there. So we are living together. But for centuries, we have been intermingled with each other. So you cannot say this one is forcibly assimilating the other one or that one. There is intermarriage there. The people are intermixed, you see. The people are even using many languages. They can even, they can talk Amharic and they can shift to Tigray. They don't have any problem. And to some extent also they can speak Arabic. It is not an issue here. But what makes it different is that since 1991, for political reasons, now the TPLF controls the area. Historically, this area, even though Tigrayans were living there, historically, this area belonged to Zamara. And the majority are Zamara, in fact. But for political reasons, because the TPLF wanted to secede at some point, so it wanted to control the area. But the people living there are Amhara, so they should accept the Tigrayan identity. So in this case, it is the TPLF which is forcing the people to assimilate into the Tigrayan culture. I think I have responded well. And you talk about motivations, strategies, and interests. You said, yes, I talked a lot about motivations, strategies, and interests. And the question you raised is, so what? That is a critical question. Well, to be frank, I limited my research to these three issues: motivations, interests, and strategies. And for the last 4 years, of course, I have been thoroughly reading, writing about these issues. I wish I could also include issues in relation to how to resolve the conflict, how to mend the social cohesion of the two communities in the area. There are more issues, in fact, that I should have investigated. But there were also many constraints that prevented me from putting this into consideration. Well, I leave these issues to the future scholars really to deal with. And Dr. Senan, I'm not sure if I have pronounced your name correct. Senan, yeah. Okay, Dr. Kiza, yeah, Dr. Kiza. Well, you raised around 12 questions, of course. Too many to respond to, but of course, let me try. Okay. And you said that my research is anchored on two theories, of course. Yes, indeed, I used predominantly, I focused on two theories, namely the New Wars theory and the protracted social conflict theories. And the moment I came here, it is my supervisor who really made me informed about these theories. And I read a lot about these theories. Then why don't I just fashion my research topic around concepts that are in these theories? These theories are all about actors, all about interests and strategies. So really I was fascinated and interested really to look at the issue from the perspective of actors. So these theories really informed me. And also these theories really provide a good theoretical framework. You can analyze, the conflict in Ethiopia along actors and their interests. strategies and motivations. For me, I used these theories as a framework. But this doesn't mean that I don't have to use other theories. There are many theories as well. So, if a need arises to get other insights from other theories, really I find it important to read other theories and get some valuable insights. So in this regard, really, the two actors that informed my work the most are Mary Kaldor, and Edward Daza. Really, I was impressed with their work, and I find it important to frame my research questions and analytical framework along their work. And with regard to introduction and the background, you said that you failed to see the difference. Even I had difficulty, even myself, frankly speaking, to distinguish between background and introduction. And I was struggling really, despite some important advice from my supervisors. I was not able to craft the introduction part and the background. I was conflating the two. But I tried my best, really. By introduction, my understanding is simply to tell about what the study is about. This is, I think, what introduction is. With regard to background, I understand that it is a bit broader, just talking about the political context, the economic context, even in terms of level of analysis, even background is broader, involving, for instance, you have to start with the global context, the African context, and that is how I made the distinction. And you raised an important issue about my research objectives. What your question was, what do you want to achieve with these objectives? Well, for me, as an academic, my intention is to bring to the fore the main causes behind the conflict, and why these actors are always fighting. What are the reasons? And what do they want out of this conflict? These are simply my motivations for engaging in this research. So I have an academic objective here. If I were a politician or a policymaker, in fact, I could go beyond and investigate the conflict in broader sense, including, for instance, how to resolve the conflict and so on. But I believe I could have also said a bit about these things. But I leave these issues for the subsequent research, future researchers. But what I have in mind when I write this thesis, there is a lot of confusion in Ethiopia. Even Helena, she doesn't know about the Wolkait conflict. Many Ethiopians are asking me, what is going on in Wolkait? Really? So, from an academic point of view, I have to just provide some explanations about why the conflict is occurring there. And I have some students in my academic, in my university. Then, I would like to read my paper and get some important insights about the conflict, and they can even continue and build on what I have investigated. So it is about an academic pursuit. And how practical are the recommendations? Even Professor Opio has also raised this issue, and I have tried to respond to it. maybe I'm ambitious. Maybe, yeah. Because, you know, conflict is about emotion. I want that emotion to calm down. First, it's before exploring about solutions and other things. So in this regard, you may say the recommendations cannot be practicable. I leave this issue for those conflict, scholars who are doing their research on conflict resolution. Maybe they are more closer to the issues than I am. And you said, with regard to methodology, you raised an important point in relation to how I selected the TPLF and the FANO. Of course, I have mentioned here that there are many actors, even though they are not fighting to take control of the area, they have in one way or another divergent interests there. Even America, the United States, has its own interest there. Eritrea has, as a neighboring country, it has also its own vested interest there. But the reason why I selected these two actors is that, one, they have been fighting directly for the last 4 decades in that area for direct ownership of the area. One. And according to the New Wars theory, and the other point I need to raise is that the New Wars theory says the actors should be fighting units. So in this regard, I don't have to include America, Eritrea, and others. Instead, I have to simply pick those actors that are directly fighting in the area. That is the reason why I selected the TPLF and FANO. And the other reason is that it is only these two actors that have been mobilizing the Tigrayan community on the other side and the Amhara community into the conflict. Foreign aid in pursuit of, their conflict in the area. And the other reason is that, there is what we call accessibility. How come, for instance, I interview American politicians while I'm doing research in the field? They are not there. They are not accessible. Or I had to go to Addis and communicate some officials working in the United States Embassy. And I didn't find it practicable. And Eritrea as well. I was not able to. Of course, I tried to contact them, but they didn't respond. So there is an issue of accessibility as well in this research. With regard to definition of key terms, you asked me about what an actor is. Well, you raised an important point that I didn't really anticipate this question really, because I thought I have really provided definitions for some key terms like motivation, strategy, and interest. I have forgotten really. But on page 32, you can find a definition about an actor. On page 32. Yeah, on page 33 it says, as with most concepts in political science, actor is a controversial term that defies an agreed upon definition. So this whole paragraph talks about an actor. Yeah. Exactly. I will shift it, okay. And you said that when the FANO or some members of the Wolkait committee presented their petitions to the Tigray Regional Council presided by the TPLF. They responded like, your petition is a work of enemies. By enemies, the TPLF meant that the Amara are simply the Trojan horse of Eritrea. By then, the TPLF did not have a good relationship with the Eritrean government. So simply, the TPLF is saying, no, it is not your question. The question is simply brought to you in order to destabilize the Tigray region, and you are simply a tool of Eritrea. But in fact, they also mean the TPLF, meaning that these Fano are simply inheritors of, or simply descendants of, the old Amara elites, whom the TPLF accused of exploiting Tigrayans. Otherwise, I will make it explicit in my thesis. How you said, how did you measure motivations, strategies, and interests? Of course, in social sciences, we do have simply a measurement by which means such and such, interest means such. Social sciences, it is about simply the understanding, this concept as understood by the participants. Then, for instance, by motivation, I mean simply the driving factors that the TPLF claimed to have involved in the conflict. So, even during my presentation, I have said that the conflict, the TPLF had formulated its own manifesto in 1975 when it launched its insurgency. Then it clearly stated the motivations. Then I brought these motivations. Then it also stated its strategies, meaning ethnic-based insurgency. So simply, I took the definition of these terms as stated by the actors themselves. And also there are some literatures that give, operational definitions about what motivation means, what strategy means. So I have also used some other literature as a way of getting definitions.
So can I say, well, that was the last question, and that is the last response. My query is, can I say you are going to fine-tune and put it in the context of definition of term, state it clearly that it is very difficult to measure an interest or a motivation other than depending on what you discovered from the participants in this course. Otherwise, these things that are hard to measure and they appear in the topic, at the first glance of the topic, the reader will be confused as to how you are going to measure them.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Alene, I see you have a second bottle of water, but but you're holding on very well. So, Dr. Kamoga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kassaw. And thank you, Dean, for the opportunity. I want to join my voice to one of the official opponents to thank you for the work. It provided a nice reading, provided a lot of historical material. So, and also your passion could already be felt in the writing. Maybe that forms part of my first question to you. You mentioned a moment ago that you are from the Amhara community, right? And what were your motivations writing this? Because part of the language you use to describe the TPLF is, to be modest, a little bit harsh. You said that they manipulate. You used words like they have never been marginalized by the central government. But you had also earlier mentioned that the Amhara had been in charge of leadership for 700 years. Would you like to speak to us about what happened in those 700 years? How did these people experience the leadership of the Amhara that maybe could have led to the way they interacted and formed their attitudes towards the Amhara? That's my first question. I appreciate that you talked about the issue of human security. And actually, human security, two questions normally guide that area. How free are we and how safe are we? That question also centers around concerns about food security, health security, political security, community security, environmental, economic security. Do you think that the government, which you said had never harassed the TPLF people, do you feel that all those areas were covered and therefore to have an agreement? And probably that also invites me to the next question, which I admire the way you have owned your work and defended it valiantly. But to that of the critical reader who brought up the issue of religion, and you were explicit about the fact that you did not intend to go down that road because of your background as an academic, also because you are convinced that religion does not form part of this. I have two little questions within that. If you say your focus was not on religion and thus you avoided talking about religion, but you made a mention of an ethical issue. You said the human cost. You talked about the human cost. It already puts you into an ethical, moral area which maybe does not fall very far away from religious concerns as well. If you are going to be an actor, an ongoing actor in the work of trying to bring peace in this area, to which pillar are you going to anchor your interventions? How are you going to enter? How are you going to speak to the persons concerned so that they actually change their motivations and their mindset, their hearts towards one another? And maybe the other question is the role of the religious persons in these two communities. Much as they are all Christians, would you imagine religious persons being the key entry, maybe beginning a conversation of interface? Is it something that you can imagine, or it's also out of consideration? And my last question to you, sir, is you said you came from the area of political science and development studies, right? And I expected that maybe as a person who has a background in development studies, you would also be interested in articulating or articulating part of your involvement with this conflict in what we call the Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly number 16, number 1, number 10. Those would be able to maybe beef up your study. I don't know whether you have any comments about that, but I thank you for your work.
Kamoga, I'm crossing this side. Dr. Mafumbo. Okay. And because we have 2 panelists left, we'll take questions from both of them, and then you'll respond to all the 3.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you very much for your work. I'm now looking for your name so that I pronounce it very clearly. Alene. It's always a pleasure reading issues of conflict, particularly ethnic conflict. My own work as a graduate student on ethno-nationalism in Rwanda, so you can imagine the interest I had in this work. I think most of the issues have been raised by the critical reader and my other panelists. What I want to do is make sure that we agree on a few things that you have to sort. I want you to pick and open for me page 34. I'm hoping we have the same version. Page 34. Do you have the proliferation of non-state actors as a section? Okay. So when we do this work and put it in the libraries, we don't know who reads it. And we don't know which state actors can find it and read it. So when I read it, I worried for you, and especially those who know that you're defending. And I'll read and quote. And he's talking about the proliferation of non-state actors. The proliferation of non-state actors is affecting the state in 2 ways. Not only is it forcing states to scale down their activities and outsource or delegate their services to the private sector, it is steering the state away from command control to negotiation. As a result, the state is no longer the sole provider of services. It has to apportion some of its services to non-state actors. As a result, the state has to grapple with a range of non-state actors, such as the multinational corporations, non-profit organizations, and criminal organizations in the delivery of its services. Is that correct? So does the state actually hire criminal organizations? So this might be small, but I've known that sometimes they come back and ask you, what exactly did you do? Now, from a more systematic approach, I'll go through very quickly. The first issue I would like you to do, and I think one of the panelists raised it, is that in your, I think you called it conceptualization. We normally call it definition of terms. It helps us to know what exactly are the terms that you're using, so that from the onset, someone starts to pick up and engage. You are saying non-state actors, state actors. Out of these, who is which? Because at some point, you actually switch them. You don't define them in your conceptual framework, and yet it is very important. And I was thinking, in that definition of terms, I want you to add, you have founded a new term that is very important, and that is the community-based actors. Because there's always now a demand that the community is involved. So let's have the non-state actors, the state actors, as well as all these other key terms that you keep throwing around. Theoretical framework. I was humbled to hear that you actually had selected 2. But from the onset you had 9. You had human needs theory, protracted social conflict, you had new theory, you had Marxist, you had game theory and human needs theory. But because when you're discussing your findings, you do not locate them in the new war theory, which I think is very, very good. That is Mary Caldo. But Mark Griffith twists it around and says wars of a third kind. And wars of a third kind are those wars that are fought over instruments, over resources, over political power, and this is exactly what your work is seemingly. So I think you need to point that out. The other issue that I thought was very critical, and I'm speaking from an historian's perspective, but also a political scientist. When you were asked about the background, I don't know why you're not so fond of your country, Ethiopia. Ethiopia was the only country that, quote unquote, they say was not colonized. So you wouldn't have expected them, since they were all together to fight colonialism, why then are they breaking up? You know? Why then are they manifesting as if they're any other country? And I'm glad that you talk about the Italian rule, and that's where that background section that they were asking you about, that is where you should locate the basis for your argument. And then I think some of us operate with maps. You put the map somewhere in the middle of the work. I want to see a map at the beginning that you showed us here. This is the Amharic. This is Wolkait. This is this. It just helps when someone is reading to follow the work. And also, I think this was raised by the immediate last panelist. You were an Amhara, right? And you're writing about these issues. To what extent were you objective? Because that will now go back to your methodology. You need to tell us your position, that I am an Amhara and I distance myself from this feeling that I am Amhara, and I'm being completely objective in what I write. I think the other things you find in the text, which I have read, maybe the one thing that you have to define and you cannot say is difficult, that is the issue of motivation. Because in your title, you wanted actors, you wanted motivations, and maybe motivations could have been turned around to mean drivers, drivers or interests. But when it comes to strategies, I don't know what you mean. Strategies to fight, strategies, what exactly is strategies in that title? And for that matter, I want you to draw your attention to motivations. Normally when we are measuring motivation, we are looking for the intensity of purpose. We are looking for the direct goal and how consistent it is, and the persistence of the way, for example, the farmer keep fighting. That is already covers motivation. So I think we need to define. Thank you very much, Dean, and Chris, and once again, congratulations.
So lastly but not least, I can start next.
Okay. I'll be glad. Alene, congratulations. Now that I'm here, you are just about to escape. Yes, and I'd like to add my voice to my colleagues to congratulate you upon coming here, because you have brought Ethiopia to us. And you are telling me something that I'm grappling with to understand. I didn't know that this work could apply to Ethiopia, because it is a place that you'll go to and you will just feel peaceful. So I didn't know that you can have 300 pages talking about conflict. No? Yeah, but that's the reality. And I wanted to begin this way, Alene. You see, it is only your abstract I read. The only part of your work I read was your abstract. Don't believe me. And when I read it, I immediately understood that the person writing this work has a bone of contention with the you call them the Tigray? Yeah. So I'm glad that my colleagues are talking a lot about your positionality in this study, because it is so obvious. And in the course of your presentation, you confirmed my fears. When you said you are yes. So my first question I had, and now which I want to ask to you, was why this Wolkait, okay? And Wolkait was written all over the place. And during your presentation now, you have beefed that up. So the words are Amhara, never mind how I pronounce them, Tigray, Fano. They have become so common in this presentation. A person who has not attended this session but will read your work will never be able to understand how this is so close to your heart, these three places. And I hope that you are seeing where I'm going. Because if this is so important to you, why is it that it is not equally articulated in the work? And so somewhere you're talking about the historical and political context. I think that's one of the contributions you said you made. But really, I thought that you're going to present a very powerful section of your work that specifically talks about Wolkait, that is going to talk about the Tigray, the Fano, the Amhara, and all that kind of thing. If I didn't see it, you'll probably draw us our attention to that part there. And perhaps that also will help you to navigate the issue of narrative and the conflict of interest. Now, the second question for me, or observation, is this, and you have, I think, attempted to respond to it in anticipation. And colleagues have asked this, because what is the real problem of this study? Why are these actors always fighting? That is the question you said you wanted to explore. And I don't know whether you have found the answer to that. Because these people are talking about the Tigray, and so forth, and all those that you're calling actors. What if they are victims? What if they are victims like any other person? Because what is the historical grounding of your study, really? To make it apparent to any reader that in fact these people who are fighting are just greedy, or they just enjoy, they're interested in fighting. Okay? As the previous panelist has said, because Ethiopia was able to resist the colonialism because they were together. So why is it that now they have that conflict? And because that will help you now to show the world that after all, the real solution to this conflict perhaps is not the way that people are pursuing the solution to that conflict. And maybe that should be a contribution you can make. Now, I also wanted to ask you a conceptual question. What is conflict for you? The statement you have made here is that conflict is about emotion. For me, conflict is always the absence of justice. And you can prove me wrong on that. So there is some justice that has to be pursued in that region you are talking about. And that's why I wanted to ask you another reflective question. What if, and maybe you're going to tell me what ethnic federalism means, okay, whatever you want to call it. like I said, that is the other line that caught my attention in your abstract, the ethnic federalism. And I would like you to do justice to the people sitting here to make us understand very well, at least to make me understand very well what that means. But whatever it means, what if it is the real solution and not the problem? Think about it. And as a scholar, I think you need to bring out that voice very well. And just as I come to the conclusion, I like the way you concluded your presentation, and I'm glad that you talked about all these other things that probably could appear like the possible solutions. You talked about a referendum. You talked about issues of transitional justice. You talked about political reforms. You talked about peaceful resolution. All those things are very good. But I think one of the panelists has talked about a key concept you might want to engage. And for me, I am not a very serious person of theories. The only theory I believe in is called Ubuntu. And I don't know whether in Ethiopia you know something about Ubuntu. Because everything that you see as a conflict, it is a violation of that theory. Ubuntu is the humanity in us. The solution to that conflict must be a human solution. There is no amount of guns that is going to resolve that conflict. There is no amount of paperwork, no amount of parliamentary sittings. People must become human again. Now, I would like to see how your work gives due attention and justice to that theory that I want to sell to you. And probably then you can come to a recommendation and say that is the way forward. Okay. Thank you very much, Dean, and I want to thank and congratulate in advance. I don't know whether this is a good time to congratulate you, but at least for answering all the questions now that I have given you the last package. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rodekera. Alene?
Thank you very much. Dr. Mafugo raised a very important point here on page 34. Really, Mafumbo. Yeah. Sorry for that. Yeah. The state has to grapple with a range of non-state actors such as MNCs, multinational corporations, non-profit organizations, and criminal organizations in the delivery of its services. The issue is with criminal organizations that, yeah, there is one thing that we have to understand when it comes to the conflict in Ethiopia. In some cases, the TPLF, for instance, is not carrying out the conflict on its own. For instance, it is hiring some other actors whose names are unknown or maybe who are hidden somewhere else. But for monetary reasons, for criminal reasons, there are actors out there. So the TPLF has been using these actors to make, havoc on some other communities, especially in the Amhara region. For instance, it has been using proxy war against the Amhara communities, for instance, there is an actor called, for instance, the Command Community, the committee. This committee is supposed to have been established by the TPLF. But in the guise of, for instance, making some claims, deep inside this command committee is doing the job of the TPLF. So there are some organizations who are doing criminal activities on behalf of other actors. These are simply security functions or activities, criminal activities done by state actors through some other actors. The other issue that you raised is in relation introduction to conceptualization or definition of terms, state actors, non-state actors, community-based actors, all things. And really, I accept your recommendation. I will include definitions for these terms. With regard to theoretical framework, you said that I used around 9 theories. Of course, yeah. But in fact, what I did in chapter 2 is simply what each theory is saying about conflict. Human needs theory saying this and this. This theory is saying this and this. But I said that mainly my work is anchored on these theories, New World theory and the protracted social conflict theory. Meaning that simply I mentioned these theories as a way of illustrating the fact that, for instance, the human needs theory is not applicable in the context of the Wolkait community, because human needs theory is about simply conflicts that happen between individuals. But the Wolkait conflict is happening between groups. So in this case, I don't have any ground to use human needs theory. So what I found, most important theories are simply the two theories, the New World theory and the protracted social conflict theories. With regard to the map, where it is put, I will consider shifting to somewhere else where it is appropriate. To what extent you were objective as an Amhara doing this research? Very critical question. Yeah. Even I was anticipating that this type of questions may be raised, because but one thing that I would like to say is that there is no any conflict of interest here that made my analysis really biased in favor of this one or that one. But in the course of collecting data, in order to ensure objectivity, of course, I can't hide my identity here in the course of doing the research. I can't hide. And expressing one's identity is not a problem here. But the issue comes when I have some preconceived ideas. If I put these ideas into the research, it will be a problem. That is why I made my name, my ethnic identity explicit here in the research, so that readers can understand from which perspective really I wrote the thesis. But in order to maintain objectivity really, I made sure that the views and the perspectives of the TPLF are represented here. Even though I'm an Amhara, I cannot reject their claims. There are claims and counterclaims on both sides. So even though I may not be able to present their views proportionally, I made sure that the views of both actors are fairly represented. And the problem was that at the time when I was conducting this research, the TPLF leaders were not available at the time because they were engaged with the conflict. So that one, I was really thinking that even though I was not able to interview them, I need to access websites, documents that reflect their viewpoints. So really, even though their words are not here, I was able to include some materials really that tell about the TPLF's perspective and views about the conflict. And that is visible really in my thesis. And thank you very much. Coming to the last doctor, yeah. He raised about, frankly said he read, the first thing he read was abstract, and he was able to, he got the impression that I'm an Amhara, of course. This is related to the issue that Dr. Mafumbo raised. Well, I don't have an issue with the TPLF. In fact, I don't have an issue. But as a political actor, you know, the violent strategy that it is pursuing, and just it is in hatred that it has harbored against the Amara, I detest, really. This is the issue that do not make just peace in the country. So, the issue is simply why the TPLF has been fighting for me as an academic. What strategies the TPLF has been using in pursuit of its motives. So beyond that, I don't have any personal grudge on the TPLF, really. But as a political actor, for me, it could have that transformative role in the country, other than manipulating things, other than simply entrenching authoritarian system in the country. The TPLF had the chance to transform the political dynamics of the country. But unfortunately, it lost its power because of just the grievances and injustices that it had inflicted on the Ethiopian people. And finally, it is how it is now. And a related question is, just throughout the paper, the recurrent words are Fano, Wolkait, and PLF. Of course, they are simply the main concepts around which this thesis really revolved, of course. But you said that they are not equally articulated. I'm not sure. In my opinion, I tried my best, really, to carve fairly amount of space for these three terms, really, and actors. But if need be, I will go through my thesis and revise. And another issue is the most important thing that most people do not understand is that what is the role of ethnic federalism in Ethiopia's political or conflict dynamics? This is an important point that you raised, Doctor. Most people think that, okay, ethnic federalism has been the best political system in the country. It was able to manage conflicts in the country. Of course, these are simply perspectives that we find in some literature. Of course, to some extent, this has been really successful in terms of alleviating some conflicts in the country. But it has also its own downsides. This is the people that, the issues that the people do not give attention to. For me, as much as it was important for me, it was also destructive, in my opinion, ethnic federalism. Because ethnic federalism as a system hinges on the use of ethnicity as a way of managing politics. So if there is ethnicity, there is a risk of manipulation. This is what is happening in Ethiopia. Ethnicity has been manipulated by the various actors and individuals as they pursue their political objectives and economic objectives. So this is a weakness that I would like to accentuate. Just not forgetting that the ethnic federalism has its own virtues.
Thank you. How does that function within the broader framework of justice? And where justice is not the law, where they're not laws, but because for me, I think it can have a chance. Well, it can be a choice because this is a choice of nations how they want to run that. But I think everything that has to be done has to be hinged in the principle of justice. If you have, for example, strong institutions, strong procedures, strong and they follow certain systems that are very well defined, then that in itself would not be the problem. In others, I'm trying to think that you need to find the real problem. That could be just the manifestation of a bigger problem. If it is in Wolkait, I beg your pardon, and wherever that could be else. Yeah.
Yeah, even in my opinion, I'm not very critical of ethnic federalism. It may be kept, maintained, and refined even. It is not a problem. But ethnic federalism has some shortcomings in its design and implementation. That is what aggravated the conflict in Ethiopia. In terms of design, look, as per ethnic federalism, ethnic groups are having their own territory. But in history in Ethiopia, the whole Ethiopia is ours. No ethnic group can claim a particular territory. But by virtue of this ethnic federalism now, these ethnic groups are given a particular territory. This ethnic group is getting this. Now there is a competition here. This land is mine. This land is mine. So where do we locate? This pertains to Wolkait. In Wolkait, before the advent of this ethnic federalism, many Ethiopians from different parts of the country were living together because that land belongs to them all. But now that ethnic federalism was implemented, that land was declared as a Tigrayan land. That means if that land belongs to them, other ethnic groups cannot live there. Why? This is one of the shortcomings of this ethnic federalism. Meaning, territories should not be ethnicized. Meaning, territory should not be just given to a particular ethnic group. The whole Ethiopia should be ours. That is my argument. So, ethnic federalism, we need to consider that ethnic federalism has its own drawback that aggravated conflicts. Otherwise, it is also fine in some respects. Okay, let me come to the last opponent, Dr. Oh, he raised 3 issues. I didn't respond to his questions. The last point he raised was if my work was informed by policies like the Sustainable Development Goals. Really, I know these goals, but I haven't really, frankly speaking, I haven't used these as a framework for my study. Even I haven't read them through in order to anchor my study. But you raised an important point here. What is the role of religious people in the area? For me, I can say these people could have played really a very constructive role in terms of even preventing conflicts from the start. But what we are watching here is that they are participants in the conflict itself. You know, taking side either with TPLF or with FANO. So instead of being promoters of peace, they are really aggravating the problem here. So really that is a homework for these individuals to work on averting the conflict in the area. The other point you raised is that you are an Amhara. What is your motivation? You said the Tigrayans have never faced marginalization, of course. Well, in history, it is only in the 19th century that ethnic differences between Tigray and Amhara crystallized. Otherwise, they were the same. They were having the same language, the same, but you know, culture ethnicity shifts, of course, across time because of different issues. So in the 19th century, this rift came. Now the Amhara began, speaking Amharic, the others. And there was also a natural boundary here, a river. On this side, the Amharas, on the side, the Tigrians. Here, in terms of, in the realm of politics as well, the Tigrians were able to maintain their own autonomy for centuries. They were autonomous, meaning they were led by their own ruling elites. So in this case, they don't have any ground to accuse Amhara elites. And you see, the Tigrians, even at different points, the Tigrian elites were also the ones who led the country. Even Meles Zenawi was a Tigrian. But the Amharas never complained that the Tigrians really ruled us, the Tigrians really oppressed us. So it is on that side that these kind of accusations always come. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alene, and thank you panelists for raising all those questions. Thank you, Alene, for answering, for responding to the questions. I think we now come to the public, open up the discussion. And today I want to stand between the panel and the public. But also very conscious of the fact that we have another defense in this room at 2. I wanted to make 1 or 2 comments as I wait for hands from the public, show of hands from the public. So you continuously say you didn't have a conflict of interest, and I think I understand what you mean. But I just wanted to share something, my own experience. I wrote, I think one time I wrote a paper, and then I was presenting it at a seminar, and the people who read my work kept on telling me, and this is what you're saying. And I struggled saying, no, that's not what I was saying. I was saying something else. I said, no, but this is what you're saying. So now for you, because you know yourself and you know what you're doing, you want us to believe that you were not conflicted at all at any point. You are not biased in any way, but the work betrays you. And that's why someone said, from just the abstract, I could tell that on the other side. So maybe what you can do for yourself and for your readers is to articulate that clearly in your work. Just explain that positionality, and that will be okay, because people who are going to read this work from when they pick it from the shelves or online, you will not be there to explain to them what you've explained to us here. And then somewhere when you're making your presentations here, you highlighted, so you're speaking through your methodology, and somewhere you talked about your interview guide. But interview guide, you said you had 29 informants. So I wasn't sure whether you're saying that it wasn't well explained, but perhaps because that was a slide. I hope that in the text it's clear what you actually mean by the interview guide with the 29 informants. I also noticed that in your presentation, again methodology, you did say how much you used documents and archives. But again, from the presentation, and I must admit I didn't read the work, from the presentation we could hear the voices of the people that you talked to. I missed any evidence of information from the archives. But maybe it is in the text and it is silent. So our audience online and here is, yes, Dr. Masiga has a question. I think you can use that mic just in the interest of time.
Thank you, Alene. It was good that you came to our Department of Religion and Peace Studies, that we could benefit from your conversation. If I'm not mistaken, we're doing a conflict analysis. Okay, if that's so, I understand that a conflict analysis has a goal. It's just a comment for reflection. So if they're asking questions of actors' motivation, interests, strategies, then what? The goal we set in conflict analysis informs what we shall use that information for. So I would think you could maybe try to anchor that in introduction to think about what was I doing the conflict analysis. So if I documented this, can it be a basis for interventions later in the future? So then my findings becomes informative and becomes foundational for future decisions regarding conflict resolution. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Masiga. Okay. I'm going to bring this to a close because I don't see any other hand. No, he's doing that. Okay, so can I ask that the panelists, we go back the other side where we came from. Dr. Hillary. No, that is closed. If there are comments, they will come in the chat. I am not taking any more questions. So may I request the panelists will retreat and then we'll come back and make our announcement. Okay, good afternoon, colleagues, and good afternoon, Alene. Okay. You see that I even said good afternoon and he said thank you. So, so I think I want to say just relax. You have passed. Many congratulations to you and to your supervisors. Walking this journey certainly was not an easy thing. A lot of hurdles along the way, but we are happy for you that it has come to this. I think I want to borrow what the opponent borrowed from Ngugi wa Thiong'o, that the beautiful ones are not yet born. Just to say, like you'd expect, especially from the discussions that we had here, there are a number of comments that you have to address before you officially submit your work to the graduate school. And so the comments, you'll get the comments from Secretariat. They're all highlighted, and I don't want to read through them because most of these issues were discussed here. We just want you to articulate and be very clear on some of the issues, to take out contradictions, to also clearly define or explain your positionality, even when you think that you are not conflicted in any way. We want that to come out clearly in the work. So you'll have up to 3 months to revise the work. But if you want to graduate in February, then you don't have the 3 months. You'll have less time than that. And you'll work with your supervisors. But before submission, Dr. Bernard Luerekera will oversee. So that means when you submit your books and a compliance report, he will actually do a word-to-word check. If you say this in the compliance report, he goes to the work and checks to confirm that you've indeed done what you promise that you have done. Again, you'll get you'll get the comments from our school registrar, and you'll be guided on what else you have to do before you submit. And I would like to use this opportunity also just to send a message to the rest of the PhDs, those who have defended and those who are lined up for defense, that please, it doesn't end with the defense. We are still waiting for the books and the clearance before we submit your work to digit to be put on the graduation list. You know, it is possible to defend, and if you fail to submit within the stipulated time, then we ask for a resubmission, and we don't want to get back to that. Otherwise, I really congratulate you. I can only imagine what it meant for you. For a long time, I actually thought you were going to defend online, given what had been going on. But I was personally very relieved and very happy when I saw you here physically. And I also want to say that I put on this wristband deliberately. You can see it. So you can tell us what that means. Yeah? For you. This is the flag of Ethiopia. Yeah. Okay, so do you want to say something? I don't want to force you. It's entirely up to you. And then we shall have some photos after that. What did you do?
Okay. I'm feeling really relieved. And after this time onwards, really, I will have a peace of mind. After having been, through a lot of struggle, in pursuit of this PhD, for the last 4 years, I have been reading, I have been, studying. While I'm playing, while I'm talking, really, this thesis is always in my mind. So this time onwards, really, I will also take care of other life activities. Yeah, once this PhD is done. And more importantly, I would like to say really thank you for those individuals and institutions that contributed to this study. And my advisor, Dr. Mbabazi. Really, she has been very supportive, and she has been even persistent, really, in terms of pushing me. Yes, because I was faltering at some point. Even, I was thinking of, quitting the program. Yes, it is too much. It was too much, really. So, if it had not been for the support of Dr. Mbabazi, I could not have finished it, really. Yes. And also, my friends or colleagues here, Dr. Naomi, Dr. Fatuma, and others really who graduated last year. They have been really supporting me. They have been with me throughout the program, giving me advice, encouragement, and even some materials even. And Dr. Helena, really, she supported me with laptop. This Mac laptop that I was working with, it failed at some point. In fact, it was almost last month that it stopped. Then I bought another one. It failed. I don't understand. Yeah. Then I just asked Dr. Helena to give me her laptop, really. She helped me with that. So I'm very grateful to you all. Thank you very much.
Okay, so you take a picture here with your mentor.
The opponent, the critical reader.
Now, as you shake hands.
Right.